Hi, and welcome to the New Property Show. I'm Steve McMenamin. This show's been put together to help both first-home buyers and investors navigate the complex process of building a brand new home. In this show, we're going to interview both builders, land developers, land agents, finance brokers, and of course, a few other businesses to get their views and inputs on how they would take the right and the correct steps to build a brand new home in today's challenging environment. Of course, we're going to cover some of the things that can go right, what can go wrong, should you choose a volume builder or should you go with a custom builder, and of course, what's the best way to actually find your builder to build the right home. Some of our special guests that will be attending this show have had various years of experience in the new home industry. Some of the guests we'll also be interviewing actually come from the real estate background, and we're going to get their thoughts and points of view of new versus old. Of course, in the New Property Show, we want to talk to you about how to obtain the best quotes, how to pick the right colours, how to make sure that you have the right inclusions when picking a builder, and what to do if something does go wrong. We'll actually also be interviewing people to discuss how to actually go through your contract, a HIA contract, a master's builder contract, and of course some custom contracts. Also in the show, we're going to be discussing, should you be going for the biggest house you can in the first property, or should you really rent a property and then buy an investment property? These are some of the complex questions that are put to me on a daily basis. So what we want to attain in the show is, what's the correct step for you? No right or wrong answer, but it's just making sure that you can have the best education, and we just cover this step by step all the way through from conversation to keys. I'm here with Olga from Tax Assure, and we're going to talk about the new home journey. Olga, who are you? Where'd you come from?
So I'm one of the directors and owners of Tax Assure and a professional businesswoman.
Well, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Need to know one important question.
Yep.
Have you ever built a new home before?
No, never built a new home, always just bought established homes.
Perfect. What's your experience been with the new home industry and market?
So I don't really know where to start or what to look for, and I haven't really had any experience with building a new home.
Perfect. Well, I think you're going to make a great case study. I need to know, will you join me on a journey over the coming weeks to, I guess, learn about the new home industry, the tips and tricks, and what you would do if you were building a brand new home?
Awesome, sounds great.
Perfect. So, with that said, let's talk about it. Where would you start right now if you were building a brand new property?
I wouldn't actually know where to start, so I would probably look for someone to help me to even know what the first process was or the first step was.
Okay. And what about brokers? Would you go a broker? Would you go a bank? How would you find that information out?
So I would probably go to a broker first rather than a bank.
Okay. And location. Some people say size matters. So, should you go regional or metro? Where would you invest?
So that's another thing I wouldn't know the answer to. So I would probably look to a professional, the same as what I do in my business, and I think there's a huge place for professionals in this world that know what they're doing and specialists in that area, because I honestly wouldn't know whether to go metro, whether to go regional, whether to go Victoria, whether to go interstate. I honestly wouldn't know where to start if I was looking at investments.
It's pretty well what I deal with daily, is really what are the correct steps to actually get started in building a new home. And of course, there's a lot of people out there renting at the moment. There's a lot of people that are struggling to get into the new home market. Some of the questions we find come up is, should you buy established? Should you build new? Of course, I'm leaning always towards the new property, having done both, but sometimes you do need to buy, I guess, in an existing area if you're looking at school zones, that sort of stuff. But this show, what we want to do is actually just focus on the steps that are involved. So it's everything from what you've just said in terms of knowing where to start, and of course how to pick a builder. So with picking builders, like, would you go online or would you drive around, look at display homes? What would you do?
I'd probably do a bit of both, but then I would come back to asking people that were in the industry. I think one of the concerns would be, especially at the moment with the building industry, about whether it is a reputable builder or whether they're going to go broke or whether there's going to be huge delays or what those factors might be. And if it's for an investment or if it's for a home to live in, I think there's a whole heap of different factors that I would have to have a look at.
And I think that carries different weight too. Like if it's for an investment, people seem to care less. They're probably, I believe personally, like less is more. But if it's for your own home, you may look into like custom, and you're going to really spend some time together. And what we want to try and do, I guess, even with yourself, when we send you out there, we want you to look at it through 2 points of view. One, it's your own home, and which builders you would go to if that's the case. Or secondly, if it's an investment property, should you go cheaper, spend less, get it started, maybe build a portfolio up that way. And I guess what we'd look at is where you want to be in 5 or 10 years from now. So if you were, as you are, you've been around, you've been in the industry for a while in terms of being a professional, you're a career-driven woman, you're powerful, you're strong, but in terms of the new home market, you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So let's get started with this journey. Let's take you through. Maybe let's just start with location,
Yeah.
and we'll work from there. Because I think once you know where you want to be, then you can take the right steps to get there. I'm joined today with Rihanna and Emmanuel from Tasmania. They own and operate a mortgage firm called Derwin Finance. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. All right, Emmanuel, how long have you been in the industry?
I've been in the industry for over 5 years now. So yeah, we started Derwin Finance just a tad over 5 years ago. So yeah.
And a lot of people...
Just had a 50th birthday.
We did.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's a good start. So mortgage brokers, what's the best thing about being a mortgage broker?
Opportunities, having multiple options with different lenders instead of going to your bank and being told about one particular product. Going to a mortgage broker, we have options with 30, 40 different lenders. And by doing that, obviously it gives the clients a better opportunity to be able to purchase a property. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think personally for me the best bit about being in the industry, I know we're not saving lives and we're not doing surgery on people, but we're in such an important stage of people's lives where, they're going to be getting into a lot of debt. Quite often they've just gotten married, or, they're in that loved up stage of their relationship, or it's someone doing it on their own, and it's just such a personal, exciting, scary time for a person to go through, especially if it's their first purchase. So being in that stage of the life for someone is such a rewarding experience.
Absolutely.
So may not be like saving lives, but you are saving money.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And stress.
and stress.
Time.
That's it. So would you guys say you're a really good middle ground, I guess, because you're communicating between the land, the builder, and of course sometimes making sure it's a heartfelt decision versus a smart decision? Would you say people lean into you a lot?
Yeah.
For that
For
process?
sure, and I think that's something that people forget with mortgage brokers, and they don't realise either, is that because we're working on the money side of things and we've got to work in the best interest of the client, that also means that we need to look into to make sure that the build's in the best interest of the client, and that the communication's happening from the conveyancer to the builder to the bank. So yeah, we're really that middle person to be able to help the client.
Especially making sure that all expectations can be met.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm going to switch gears for a second there. So over my various years of, I guess, dealing with clients, there's been different strategies. Some people actually like living at home. I know this for the mums and dads out here watching, but children nowadays are staying at home till 30, 35.
Yeah.
With that said, investing. So there's some advantages with investing. So my thoughts on it would be, there's no tax advantages typically on buying your own property.
Correct.
So if you're on a high income, you want to reduce your tax. So let's talk about investment property. Why an investment property, and just, I guess, staying at home or staying in your rental?
Why investment property? As everybody knows, super's not a really good retirement plan. Cost of living is going up, and how much everyone's getting paid at work hasn't changed for many, many years. So an investment property could be a great plan for retirement in future. Another reason would be surplus cash. Having a secondary income that you're earning from your rental for an investment property is really good. And obviously getting the property bug is another good reason. What we're noticing is people just want to continue buying and buying and buying and building a portfolio to continue that second income and potentially one day replace their main income.
So that's known as, I guess, passive income.
Absolutely.
So it's more money coming in than money going out. So thank you for joining the New Property Show. Last thing, any closing thoughts before you leave us? Capital growth or passive income?
I like passive income. I think cash flow is king, personally.
Cash flow is king.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Done.
Thank you so
guys.
much for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I'm here with Intaj from Countryland. Thanks for coming on to the New Property Show. First of all, Intaj, who are you? What do you do? And why land?
Thank you, Steve, for inviting me on the New Property Show. I'm a property developer in western suburbs of Victoria, Melbourne especially, and my all the developments are in western suburbs, which is includes Truganina, Tarneit, Melton, Rockbank, Thornhill Park, Werribee, this sort of area. And so we started as a small development, 83 lots. So just the residential land subdivisions is the main business here.
I guess as an investor, and both even the first home buyers listening, I think the most important thing to land, apart from location, and you obviously talked about with it being 30 to 35 kilometres from the CBD, infrastructure. So the word infrastructure, it's a large word. What would you define that is? What are you looking for, both as a customer and a developer?
Well, look, if I were to buy a paddocks, which is a big patch, so I buy 60 acres, 100 acres, the property, the first thing I look at, make sure this is PSP approved. So not in a Greenwich, for example. And thank you asking for that things they have to be infrastructure. The meaning, the drainage, the stormwater, meaning that you need to have a sewage. So these are the things when we buy properties we look at. If it's a far away from the infrastructure, that means you can't deliver your project. A lot of developers can trap into it, saying that because PSP been approved, so you literally can go to the council and get a planning permit. But if it's away from the infrastructure, which means the stormwater, drainage, and sewage, technically you can't develop it. Even you have a planning permit, but it's no use of the planning permit. I have come across few developers who's been very big. I can't name them. And they made a big mistake. They went out and they bought a couple of patch. I'm talking about 150 acres, things like that. And they have received a planning permit, but they can't practically deliver that patch. So my advice would be for those people who are listening through your show, buying a property, when you're buying a land from the land developer, you make sure you ask the questions about how far is from the services, which is infrastructure. So the best thing, a lot of people go and buy properties online or buying through the real estate agent. I think my great advice for first time buyers, go out and view site by your naked eyes, and you can see that are there roads surrounding, is it not dirt roads. So it will take a time, even though developer will bring it, but it's going to take a time.
We've been talking about the New Property Show. So with that said, and one of the reasons this show came about was obviously COVID. So people's buying habits changed. A lot of people are now buying online, but they forget that you can actually hop in a car. Personally, with buying any land, I personally recommend getting out, putting your feet on the ground. A couple of other things there. So let's just say you're an investor and you're trying to build your wealth. We talked about time the other day. You and I had a conversation. What's some of the benefits with buying into the future?
Well, I would say that now, anyone listening now, that you always know that, and this is no secret to this recipe pretty much. You go government website now, where you can see the land to define in two ways, infield and a greenfield. The meaning that there are projects, those already surrounded by infrastructure, they infield, and a greenfield, the project like in growth corridors. I always say this thing, growth corridor is a road to millionaire. So if you want to be a millionaire and you have a passion and interest in a property, you go out and invest in a growth corridor. And the first thing you want to see that, whether the property have been PSP approved or not, or a draft, especially in Victoria State, and negotiate with the farmer or through the real estate agent. You want to have a longer settlement. So for example, I've been lucky, and some friend of mine, they have bought a properties on 5-year settlement, 4-year settlement. So technically, what can you do with that? It give you an opportunity to A, planning, B, you can get a planning permit and you can sell to another developer or develop yourself. But moreover, it give you a price increase. Beautiful. Because in 5 years' time, the price definitely is going to go up. As you farmer, I bought your property and I'm paying 10% deposit, but in 5 years' time, the property, for example, I bought it for $10 million, it's definitely going to go up. So I would be the beneficiary of that growth because I've signed a contract with you and I paid you 10% deposit when initially I signed a contract, and then I'll pay you 10% later. Depends on how you negotiate with it.
Beautiful.
And that's about it. Since you sign a contract as being a farmer, well then obviously you are beneficiary of receiving 10%, you receive another 10%, 20%, and the person who bought it, like myself or some other people.
Thank you so much for joining us. One piece of advice you would give to yourself 10 years ago, in a couple of seconds, what would that be?
Well, look, I'm glad that you asked me this question. You only make money when you buy cheap.
Beautiful. Love you. Thank you. I guess the question that's been on everybody's mind is interest rates and how you feel will affect the market. I'd love to hear from one of you guys in terms of what your thoughts are.
Interest rates, obviously, they've been increasing for many months. How it's going to affect the market is, I believe, how much consumers will be able to borrow, especially borrowers who have obtained pre-approval in the past, and with the raising of interest rates, that can impact their serviceability and how much they're going to be able to borrow. So I believe that's the main reason, yeah.
I think the same, and it ultimately comes down to the communication between the buyer, the mortgage broker, or the bank, if you choose to go to a bank, and as well as if you're going for a real estate agent or a builder, because as Emmanuel said, what you are getting approved for or what your preliminary assessment is telling you could be completely different once the RBA changes their cash rate from what it was when you originally were pre-approved or had your preliminary assessment done, even if it was a couple of months ago.
So obviously you guys are dealing with clients up front with the interest rate side of it as core. So I guess when you're dealing with a broker, you probably need to think ahead. You not need to think about, I guess, the where you're currently at, but where it could be in 3 to 6 months, because sometimes you're looking at land that's not settled.
Yes.
100%. So over to you guys.
I think interest rates are just one of the factors at the moment. So I think with the ATO calling debt in, with the banks tightening up, all of those factors are going to put pressure on people about how much they've got to borrow, about what their pressure points are in repaying the debt, and also pressures on their businesses as well.
Meeting with some builders and designers and architects and interior designers the other day, there's definitely homeowners are feeling spooked already.
For sure.
That I think the decision-making time frame and the ability to actually make a decision to start is taking longer and potentially not even happening at all, just because they're fearful of the change. So I think that it's impacting already, and certainly the decision-making time frame's impacted.
I think too, would you say then that some people are putting projects on hold and just seeing what happens? Or,
Yeah, absolutely.
So what sort of advice are you giving people to be prepared, or how could they minimise their impact?
Yeah, great question. What I generally advise our clients is don't over leverage yourself. So if a bank is saying that you can borrow a certain figure, don't go out and buy at that figure. Have a think about it, maybe cut it back a little bit. Another thing that we like to do is educate our clients, is explain to them, if interest rates go up another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, are you going to be comfortable in being able to make those repayments? And if the answer is yes, then maybe it is a good idea to purchase and continue, because obviously you can handball it back to your tenants to increase the rent, but state by state it does change, and there's obviously different laws in place with that.
Another thing too, which a lot of people don't actually know, is that the bank will assess your application at a higher interest rate than what's actually being offered, because the bank wants to make sure that there is a little leeway there for a client and they're not getting approved based off that interest rate. If you
Exactly
might be able
right.
to speak about that in a bit more detail.
So if you're getting an interest rate at 4%, the banks aren't assessing that you can make the affordability at 4%. They're generally slapping another 2 to 3% on top of that, just in case if interest rates do go up, is the affordability there?
And that assessment will take into account whether there's ATO debt specifically,
Yep.
and that will affect the lending power as well.
For sure. Yeah, we see that happen, especially if you're self-employed or, yeah.
Are businesses still buying or acquiring at the moment, or what's happening with businesses?
I assume so. So what we're seeing is levels of ATO debt and tax debt that have been sitting there for 2 years, that there hasn't been the pressure points that there would normally be. There hasn't been the pressure points from banks either, but that debt is now also coming across to directors personally. So directors are personally liable for that tax debt. So if the directors are coming to people like you to borrow, those debts that were typically on the company's account have now come across to the director's personal account, and so when they're personally going to borrow with the banks, it's affecting them.
What advice then would you give to people, just 3 tips, and then I'll go over to you, Katie, but 3 tips that you could do to, for getting the rate, what's 3 ways that people could just save money? Where could they save money the most?
I like being old school.
Yeah.
Print out your bank statements with a highlighter, go through every single transaction that you've done for the past 6 to 12 months, and narrow out with unnecessary purchases. It might be subscriptions that you've signed up 6 to 12 months ago that you don't use, but they're taking out a $15 fee every month.
Okay, you typically deal with clients, I guess, with a higher net worth because they're building custom homes. What's an average build cost at the moment that you're dealing with? Give me an example of a few clients that you've dealt with. Are they spending $500,000 or $1 million on a custom build, or how much?
$500,000 just doesn't cut it anymore for a new home build, unfortunately. So unless you're looking at doing something really sharp, you know, potentially 1 bedroom, 1 living area kind of thing, it just doesn't go very far anymore. I think the rate at which construction costs have gone up, and I think, you know, between 2016 and 2020, construction costs went up like an average of 0.5% every quarter. So when it was at that rate, everything was manageable, but it's now that it's gone up so fast, you know, we're tracking towards a new norm that's much higher than it was, you know, back in 2020 even. So when people coming into a new home build, if they're looking at doing a 3-bedroom house, you know, potentially 2-car garage, 2 living areas, you're probably looking at least 800 to 900,000, and that's with really, you know, a really sharp design, basic finishes, not going over the top.
Wow, it's expensive.
I didn't even realise it's so prevalent today.
I've met previously clients that have shopped 10 builders. Typically they get exhausted and they pick the wrong builder, so I think it's still where like a builder broker or someone like that would come in board and actually assist. I think that's most important. So in summary, where do you think rates are going to go in the next 6 months?
We talk about this literally every day in the office, and the ballpark changes. I personally think we're probably going to have at least another 2 to 3 rate rises. I think December there's not going to be a rate rise because historically they don't touch them in December. But I think the 0.25 increase that just happened shows that what they're doing is working.
Perfect.
And they might start slowing the taps down.
Yourself?
Same. Yeah, I've just listened to the economists and the advisors through the banks and see what they are saying. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying as well.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be a steady climb, stop for December, but I think it's going to pick up again next year.
And yourself?
I think all debt's going to be tightened. I think the ATO are absolutely ramping up debt collection action. I think the 2-year holiday, so to speak, that everyone's had in relation to interest rates, in relation to some people having rent relief, in relation to ATO debt collection has stopped, and that it'll all keep going back to pre-COVID and even higher.
Well, thank you, panel, for joining us. So what I want to, I guess in summary myself, just sort of go back is, so focus on the rate, make sure you shop your bank, of course get a fixed price contract which will cover, be careful with what you're actually spending your money on, maybe put a project on hold if it's too scary. You don't have to build now, and of course make sure you get all your debt and your affairs in order before going and seeing a broker. So guys, thank you so much. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks.